but we didn't get to the readings.
Okay.
Both were going to try to do the reading today. I didn't get all the way through it, but she's a faster reader than I am.
Yeah. Well, and
Maybe
it was longer this week. This might have been our longest reading, 8 pages. I don't know. Well, let's start with this. We're going to be in 2 Corinthians tonight with our passage. And so I want to give a little bit of context for kind of where Paul's at as he's writing this 2 Corinthians book. Yeah, it's going to be hard probably to see from the corners there. I mean, basically, it's just the passage. It's 2 Corinthians 11, starting in verse 16. He says that, again, I say, let no one think me foolish, but if you do, receive me even as foolish, so that I also may boast a little. What I am saying, I am not saying as the Lord would, but as in foolishness, in this confidence of boasting. Since we may boast according to the flesh, I will boast also. For you, being so wise, tolerate the foolish gladly. For you tolerate it if anyone enslaves you, if anyone devours you, if anyone takes advantage of you, if anyone exalts himself, if anyone hits you in the face. To my shame, I must say that we have been weak by comparison. So if you remember this when we actually covered 2 Corinthians on Sunday mornings, he's kind of setting up the fact that he's about to say a bunch of things that he should be able to brag about, right? From a human standpoint, he should be able to brag about these things. And he's just kind of setting up the fact that he's about to do that. So he goes on, he says, but in whatever respect anyone else is bold, I am speaking in foolishness, I too am bold. For they are Hebrews, so am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am speaking as if in saying, I more so. In far more labors, in far more imprisonments, beaten times without number, often in danger of death. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have spent adrift at sea. I have been on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my countrymen, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers among false brothers. I have been in labor and hardship, through many sleepless nights, and hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Apart from such external things, there is the daily pressure on me of the concern for all the churches. Who is weak without my being weak? Who is led into sin without my intense concern? So he's listing all this stuff, right? And I have to say, if anybody's buying into the prosperity gospel version of things, just look at Paul's life, right? The Christian life was never meant to be without difficulty, right? And we can all tell our own stories of that, right? But he obviously went through great difficulty, and honestly, as he lists these things, even I don't think we can understand how difficult each one of these experiences was for him, right? Like deep emotional distress over every single one of these situations, right? He goes on, if I have to boast, I will boast in what pertains to my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, he who is blessed forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, the ethnarch under Aretas, the king, was guarding the city of Damascus, of the Damascenes, in order to seize me. And I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall, and so escaped his hands. This might seem like not a big deal to us. In his time and his culture, this was him being a weenie, right? A guy who wasn't strong enough to stand up for himself. He had to run away like a scared girl down in a basket, right? This was truly weakness for him, right? Embarrassing for him. He goes on. Boasting is necessary, though it is not beneficial. But I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know that a man in Christ who who 14 years ago, whether in body I do not know, or out of the body I do not know, God knows. Such a man was caught up to the third heaven. And I know how such a man, whether in body or apart from the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words which man is not permitted to speak. In behalf of such a man I will boast, but in my own behalf I will not boast except regarding my weaknesses. He's talking about himself, so it's kind of weird how he's talking about this. But for I do not wish to boast, I will not be foolish, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from this so that no one will credit me with more than he sees in me or hears from me. Now, this is all just to set up what he's about to say. This long thing, right? About all the difficulties he experiences in life, how difficult it was to be Paul. And I think just generally how difficult it is to be human, right? Like we can relate to all that. He's setting that whole long train of things up to say what he's about to say, which I find very profound. He says, because of the extraordinary greatness of the revelations, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, because he might exalt himself because he had this experience that very few people have ever had of this being caught up in the third heaven. We don't know what that's all about, but very few people have had any kind of experience like that. He could take pride in that, right? So to keep me from exalting myself, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. Now, what's interesting about this is we don't know what this thorn is, but we do know the source of this thorn, right? Our enemy, Satan, was the source of whatever this difficulty was that he had. And this thorn was given to him, right? And his response is probably the response we would all have, I would hope we would all have, which is this. He says, concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. He went to prayer about it, right? He's like, I got to talk to God about this. This is just difficult, whatever this thing is, right? And God's response, sorry, prosperity gospel people, right, was not, I'm going to remove that thorn from you so that you don't have this difficulty, right? And of course, we probably want that same thing, to have whatever the difficulty is in our life removed. But he says this. He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. What's sufficient is not the relief of the problem. It is his grace that is sufficient. For power is perfected in weakness. The power that we have as believers is actually perfected. It's made complete, not when we're strong, but when we're weak. It's this totally upside down way of thinking. And definitely upside down way of thinking in the Roman world, where strength was everything. Power might was right? Power was everybody wanted power, right? And he's saying, actually, that's not where strength comes from for us as believers. It actually comes from our weakness. He said, so because of that, he says, most gladly, therefore, I would rather boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in distresses, in persecutions, in difficulties in behalf of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I want to hear you guys' thoughts about it, but for me, it is the profound upside down way of the Christian life, right? That he's not looking at all of those things that went on. He did that long litany of all the stuff that went down, and he wasn't like, woe is me, what a terrible life I had. And seriously, he had a terrible life, right? From an outside perspective. Instead, he was like, actually, as I'm going to the Lord about this, he made it extremely clear to me that was the best thing, to have all of those bad experiences, because it pushed me to my weakness so that the power of Christ could dwell in me. Right? Yeah, just think about all that.
Paul said here, messenger of Satan.
Yeah.
My question
And you would think God would want to get rid of anything Satan produced, right? Yeah.
Question. So people could be, we know that God deals.
Sure. Not always in the timing we want it to be that.
And that's true. But at some point, I believe God can use Satan to bring trouble to a person who's exhibiting.
Sure. To bring them down, yeah, to humble them. Yeah. I agree. Well, what about those of us? Hey, your hubby's down this way. Welcome to the hot box. But what about Paul, who pride didn't seem to be an issue for him, right?
I think he's always like that.
Well, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. I mean, he doesn't mention a struggle with pride here, but he could have, 100%. I mean, he had things to boast in, right?
Sure.
But every time it's funny, he's like this self-deprecator here.
Yeah.
Like every time he has a moment to like be like, I did this great thing. He's like, I'm being insane now. You're talking about this, all right? Like he's like, he doesn't want to talk about his successes because those great things that he could hang his hat on, he's like, that's not where it's at.
But he keeps bringing.
Well, he does here, but he keeps being like, what? Because he wants to get to this point, right? And this point is, it's not his strengths that are his best asset. It's actually his weakness that is his best asset, right? Because that's when Christ can fill that void.
He's like trying to show like all the strengths, but also be like, you know, like they're great, but not
Page 3.
Yeah, exactly. And we're so prone, I feel like, as humans, and I'm including me, like we want to focus on our strengths. When I'm feeling a little down, I want to think about how great I am, right?
Yeah.
Like pump myself up, right?
Tell a friend, hey,
Yeah, tell me again why I'm so great, you know? But I think so.
like we're raised, like please, I don't know, to like hear good things, like we want to hear that. Like I know, like especially like with both my kids, Allison more so because she's younger, but yeah, it's like we get age, they're so eager to please and want good, positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
I'm confused about something. I thought the homework was on, 2 Corinthians 10:3-6.
It is. This is something.
Okay. All right.
You're like, what did I missed this part?
Thank you. I was
Yeah.
confused.
I just was wondering if we did like the wrong study.
No, this is which is very possible for me to have that I would have done something wrong, but no, this is just setting up our discussion.
Oh, okay.
Where are we at? Thank you.
Hey, Bev, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Hold up, guys. Hold up, because this is really good. This is 2 Corinthians 9.
Did you?
Yeah.
Mine doesn't have a 2 Corinthians 9:17.
No, she just pulled that. We're pulling out all sorts of stuff.
But my Bible doesn't have that.
Yeah, is that in the Apocrypha?
9:17.
Oh, this one has it.
What in the world?
Yeah.
This,
How embarrassing.
the Lexingham.
Wait, 10.
Oh, 10.
10:17. Okay, there you go.
Oh.
10, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. I was like, scandalous.
Yeah.
This is the Bev standard version. 9:17.
Oh, so the thing about the thorn in the flesh thing, I've heard that used a million times referring to like some sort of physical ailment.
We don't know
But-
what it is.
The way he made it sound, and when we read it there, it didn't sound like a physical ailment. It sounded like a spiritual attack of some kind, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Satan was the source of it. But we do know that Satan can be the source of physical problems too. I mean, that's a
Joe.
sure, yeah. Well, and and actually, we know that sin can contribute to physical ailments too. We shouldn't always link those things. Let's be clear on that. Not every time we're sick, it's because of a sin issue, right? But sin can cause physical ailments too. So it could be physical. It could be just a spiritual thing. It could be a psychological thing, like he was dealing with some sort of maybe psychological problem, depression or yeah.
Always there, always there, always there.
It's a little bit like a splinter, right? That embeds itself and you can't quite get to it, but then like it's in your foot and you're dealing with it.
I always try to get splinters out right away, but I know of some carpenters who they're like, oh yeah, I'll get that later. And it's like,
It's not going to be it.
why?
Yeah. All right. So that is a backdrop to our 2 Corinthians.
Could I just write down whatever you just said? That? What's that? The reference?
Oh,
We read all that.
Just the reference.
Oh, sorry.
You know where Paul talks
11,
about
16,
Thank you.
12,
Thank you.
that's when Paul talks about being like shipwrecked, and
I got it. Thank you.
he was kind of saying he can't boast, or he could boast in himself, but
look at all these great things I did for the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of deal.
all the accomplishments.
And he's actually, the benefit of that was to make me weak. So Jesus could be strong, right?
It's just so foreign.
It really is
Like
foreign,
I
right?
was saying, it's just like, I don't know, maybe it's our culture.
Yeah.
It's just not even palatable.
I think it's humanity. It could be a cultural thing, but I think it's across cultures that we tend to want to focus on our strength, right? Our human ability to think great thoughts, accomplish great feats, right? Like cultures are built around it,
Yeah.
right? But the call on us, or the way we should view all of that stuff is he calls it rubbish, garbage. It's
Aren't those the basic tenets of humanism?
100%.
When you are culture, that's what the
Yeah. And even people who don't know humanism, who have studied humanism, who don't call themselves humanists, humanist principles are all over culture. It's just, and that's what it is. It's the power of humanity to accomplish the good that needs to exist in the world. Come on. What evidence do we need more from history that humans are not going to be the ones to accomplish that, right? Oh my gosh. Terrible. We're terrible. All right, so that should set up now what you actually did study.
Okay.
2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 6. Let me read that before or actually, will someone read the little introductory paragraphs there?
With great joy and feeling, the Apostle Paul wrote this letter to Corinthian believers on his third missionary trip. He had founded this church earlier and actually spent 18 months in intensive ministry in this large center of commerce, travel, and morality. In this letter, he gives the marks of genuine Christianity and defends his calling as an apostle. These verses are a part of his.
Somebody else want to hit the context? You guys have the context paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay.
context, after explaining his ministry and talking about the collection for the saints in Jerusalem, Paul now gives his credentials as an apostle in chapters 10 through 15. He exposes the false apostles and defends his God-given authority and ministry as an apostle of Jesus Christ. His sharp words are addressed not against the church as a whole, but against a group of false teachers. These false teachers are concerned only with how someone looks or someone speaks. They're evaluating by outward appearance or performance. In chapters 10, 1 through 2, he explains that he doesn't normally speak sharply, but he's prepared to do so when he comes, if that is what the situation calls for. Yet he doesn't want to be courageous in the flesh, in his own abilities and strength, in his own thinking and behavior apart from God, in a manner of one who is not indwelt and controlled by the Spirit of God.
And you can see how that fits with what we were just reading, right? It's kind of the lead in. So verses 3 and 4. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not wage battle according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. So even though he's still in his human body, how does he not war? That he does war, yeah, but in what way does he not war?
Physically.
Right. According to the flesh, which is the physical body, but it is with human weapons is a better way to state it.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That he doesn't use human techniques to fight these really important things. Yeah.
You
Yes, well, yes, and he does say what he does use is that. How close are we here? Yes, there we go. How are Christian weapons described? What weapons does he use there?
They're powerful for the tearing down, powerful to God. Or I mean,
Yes,
for tearing down.
powerful to God. Is that your translation?
That's what this one says.
Which one?
You know, powerful to God.
Through God is a better.
This one's LEV.
What do you think?
Like
Oh, the Lexington English Bible. It's a good one. It's just a weird way to say that.
yeah.
Because it's actually a descriptor of the power. It's divine power, not powerful to what was it? Powerful.
It says
Right.
but powerful to God.
Powerful
Weird.
to God. That's just a
Really
weird way to say that. I get it. I mean, that's one way you could translate that, but it's not really what it's saying. So yeah,
Mighty because of God.
exactly. Yeah, it's the source.
Yeah.
The source is divine. Is divinity, right? And that's what he places his confidence in. How could we contrast that to fleshly weapons, human weapons? What would be the difference there?
I like to argue with my words.
Sure.
They make a lot of sense to me.
Yes.
Very convincing.
Yes. And
Well, but
sometimes
even-
you've probably won some arguments
I
with
mean,
them.
I wish I could win more.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but is it kind of contrasting physical and spiritual here? I mean, or flesh versus spiritual? Or,
Yes.
So, I mean, arguments would be still like using.
So,
Yeah, that would still be like a weapon of man or something, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And even though the illustration is physical, right, like flesh, right, like skin, bones, muscle, it's talking about human weapons, which is our minds and the way our minds process things, right? Argumentation, like anything that we use as humans to fight uh, battles.
You could use threats or fear or
Yes.
manipulation.
There we go. Yes.
I mean, it's kind of like the Sunday school answer, like sword, shield, armor.
Yes, I've got. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, like where he's describing like.
Oh, Christians' weapons.
Well, no, I mean like
You're talking about the fleshly
the
weapon?
physical. I mean, is because it talks about bringing down fortresses.
Yes.
So I mean, normally you would use like a catapult and I don't know what they used in that day, but I mean like the Legion, those guys, they had those little swords, and like the Romans, they had very good technique at organized warfare.
100%. Yeah.
I don't know. Is it kind of alluding to that, saying that's not?
No, it's part of it. It's part of the illustration he's using, right? Is that because also a human weapon is power and might, right? It's including all of it. Now he's not talking about warfare tactics between nations, right? That's not at all the context he's talking about. But he's using that picture to describe all these efforts that we put into winning, right? In any given battle. He's saying that's not the way we walk. We don't walk according to human weapons, which are all of those things. It is might. It is a battering ram on a fortress. But even the fortress he's describing here, it's an illustration of something,
Like evil,
a spiritual illustration. Yeah.
I was noticing it's kind of almost pointing towards really bigger wins too, because like a
Bigger,
fortress, a big win, like not a small battle being won. Like if I finally get Jimmy to put his socks in the hamper instead of next to the hamper or whatever, like that's not really his major problem. But say that did happen, that's not the fortresses or the strongholds that I would rather get to. Almost like if I used the real battling, I just feel like maybe you're winning a bigger thing when you're using the better weapons. And maybe I don't need to think about small battles that I win by myself. Or,
So use human weapons on smaller battles.
I mean, maybe it's just irrelevant. The small things are irrelevant, but these words are big to me. Strongholds,
Okay, yeah.
fortress, and I feel like he's trying to say that these will be big wins.
Well, and he does describe what he's talking about specifically, and I think that's what you're getting at. Like, what are these strongholds that he's talking
Well, sometimes in the day to day, we might think of smaller things.
Sure.
And try to fight them, maybe.
Sure.
But like he's saying, like I have a big wins for you.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think about strongholds that often. I just don't think big that much. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, he describes it, right? Let's go on to 5. We are destroying arguments and all arrogance raised up against the knowledge of God, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, and we are ready to punish all disobedience whenever your obedience is complete. So he's now describing at least the context of the fortresses that he's speaking, right? Where the battle is, right? So what kinds of of things is he describing? Yes, he must be in the King James.
Mine's King James too, and it says imaginations, casting down imaginations, and then it has like a thing over to the side where you could also say reasons, casting down reasonings and every high thing.
Yeah, reasonings would be better. Imaginations doesn't hold what that word is really talking about. It could be translated that way again, but that's
Like,
not.
is
Really,
that just anything?
it's not that. It's really like argumentation. It's any sort of ideas that are coming against the knowledge of God.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. There are plenty of ideas out there, right, that exist in our culture. That what's that?
Truth. What is the truth about God? It's the truth. Everybody has their own truth.
Yes.
Like the
Yeah.
postmodern translation.
Yeah, and even definitely the postmodern thing, but also some very, in some ways we're moving past the relativity of postmodernism to an absolutism on false ideas.
Yeah,
right?
I totally.
Where you get in line or get out of here, right? It's not like everybody just goes along to get along. That's the relativism thing. It's now like you better hold to this, or you are hateful and bigoted. And did you really?
Like a friend with a coworker.
Were you on the same side, or were you kind of?
No, my friend are on the same side. She was
Okay.
having an issue with a coworker, and we were just having like a similar conversation of, it is. It's like you're so hateful and spiteful if you have kind of like a truthful opinion, if I'm being honest, of what God truly is. And I just kind of find it funny.
Yeah.
Like they have an issue with like obedience to God.
Mm.
And so they're kind of like changing it and being like, well, that's hateful. Well, no, it's being
100%. And are these people who would call themselves Christians? Is that
absolutely
okay? Because I would say even people who are not Christians, it sounds kind of funny, but they have obedience issues,
well,
right?
Yeah, and it's like they're Christian, but they're not part of like a religion type. You
Sure.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like accepting love,
Yeah.
love, we accept everything. And it's like we could love everyone, accepting. Like I always love my children. I'm not always going to accept the bad behavior.
Sure.
That's where it's all. I see that label.
Which was true in Paul's time, by the way. His battle that he's waging is against those who were followers of Jesus. They would definitely say that they were. But
Who were you going to say the non-Christians were going to obey?
that non-Christians, it's an obedience issue for them too.
Who are they?
Right.
Who is the issue for them?
Their disobedience of God.
Oh.
Right?
Okay. I thought you were saying that they were trying to obey. I couldn't figure out what you were
No. Well, I would say that since you brought that up, non-believers are trying to obey a certain set of standards that they've made for themselves.
Yeah, so they can feel self-righteous.
100%.
Yeah.
But 100 out of 100 people would tell you that they don't even live up to their own standards.
Yeah.
Right? But I was referring to actually God's standard.
Yeah.
That God is making a standard, and they're saying, "No, thank you." Right.
Yeah.
So we don't usually think of that as a disobedience issue. We usually think of believers that way, but it really is that.
Yeah.
Too.
I see.
They're unwilling to submit themselves to that.
Yeah,
Yes, that's a little more easier to understand English, right? 100%, right? There's plenty, and we were talking about this, plenty of things in our culture that there are these arguments out there. And usually the second part of that is a pridefulness, right? An arrogance about it. It's not just the idea, but then it's backed up with this bravado and arrogance of we are right, everyone else is wrong, right? Yes.
One thing that we were kind of discussing as we were doing work on verse 5, there's like a duality there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I was kind of thinking about that. Is it safe to say that when you're casting down the imaginations, you're pushing somebody toward obedience to Christ? I mean, do they go hand in hand?
Yeah.
And
Because that is what he's talking about is winning people over with arguments. What do you say that? I think that is a good way to say it. He's actually talking about taking every thought captive, which, by the way, I'll just tell you, I think that verse gets misused a lot. I mean, I like the idea of like people going, I struggle with lust, I'm going to take my thoughts captive. There's sort of a relationship there, but that's actually not what he's referring to. He's saying he's trying to win their minds, right? Trying to win our minds. Like our minds should be won over by the truth, right? We've got bad ideas that need to be taken captive with the truth, right?
Right.
Like taking like, I don't know, like it's like taking over all of our thoughts, not just like the thoughts that we think need it, not just like, oh, this is coming up, but just like completely,
Yeah,
right? Like completely captive.
yeah. It's the renewal of our minds.
Yeah.
It's that idea, right?
The little finger, take care of the base.
That definitely happens. I know that's definitely happened in my life, right? God's gotten truth into this area, and it never stays in that area. It always permeates and goes in all these different directions that I never thought it was going to go in good ways, right? And it can definitely work the other way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bad ideas can have this cancerous effect too, right? I show this video to my students at the beginning of every year, first couple weeks of every year, of this guy who did some interviews on the campus of the University of Washington. And he basically just goes around and asks some pretty straightforward, simple questions. You know, he says, you know, can a man be a woman, right? And everybody's like, yep, they can. Should men who identify as women be allowed in women's restrooms? Yeah, of course. We need to support them, and you know, they're totally buying these ideas. Then he goes, would you believe me if I told you that I was a woman? I'd say, yeah, we support you. We're all about that, right? And he's clearly a blonde-headed guy, right? And a white guy. And he says, what if I told you I was Asian? And they're like, sure, if that's the way you identify, yeah, sure. Like, what if I told you I was 7 years old? He's like a mid-40s guy. Well, I guess if you believe that, you know, I'm not going to be one to tell you you're wrong or whatever, right? And he's like, what if? So can I go to second grade because I'm a 7-year-old? Can I go to second grade? Well, certain communities might accept you doing that, right? Like, well, what if I told you I was Chinese, a 6-foot Chinese woman? Would you believe? And they pretty much all went, sure, right? And what I like about it is it just shows the ludicrousness of when you start with a really bad idea. And if you're being intellectually honest, and they were being intellectually honest by continuing on, but it was ridiculous by the end of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's just how I hear it.
Ridiculous in the beginning.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what he's trying to expose, right?
Good job, Gary.
Yeah.
I had one more thing about the that verse 5 there. I have a friend who grew up in church, and he kind of got a divorce, sowed his wild oats. He sort of was like, push church away and like just see how far he could go or whatever. And he said that he realized that it's like everything spiritual and like it's evil. Evil is the other way. And so he's like kind of drove him back to church. And I just wonder, is that can you sort of get that out of this verse where there's two sides, and if you go all the way hardcore world, you're gonna realize, wow, it's like the devil. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of his.
Yeah.
He goes to church now, and he's married. Not.
So he recognized that whole pursuit as originating with Satan. I mean, maybe he wouldn't say that, but he's calling it all evil. Right? So
Yeah.
I think there's.
I guess he was like realizing the source was evil. Yeah.
Right. It seemed like just fun and partying and hookup culture and all that kind of stuff, but actually the root of it was evil. Because the root of it is evil.
That I just showed for Mason. It was really cool. That was for kids, but it just made me think, oh, that's a cool idea. It's like two ladders. One way you're going up to God, one way like your foot's in the world, but just showing like where you're taking your steps. Like eventually you have to like choose like where is it going to pull you for. It's just a really great illustration. Obedience. You have to be all in one. Not that we always are, but it's like you can do that, but like then you're putting one foot here.
Yeah, it's not close, right? Like our world wants to paint in the gray, right? And say, just having fun. I'm just, enjoying life. I'm just sowing my oats. I can't believe how many times in their early 20s. This is just a temporary sowing of my oats. Like it's not truly evil, right? But it is.
That was me. But I was like too prideful to be like I'm wrong.
Yeah,
So kind of more like
that's the other part of it.
I still believe God, not people, but yeah, you can't be. It's a
But all of that has consequences.
Yeah.
But one day,
Oh,
city, a lot of really hard things.
Because just that idea is like, yeah, I may make a lot of mistakes. We all make a lot of mistakes. But then, once I'm done sowing my wild oats, I'm just gonna, and then everything's gonna be great, But there's always consequences. Always consequences. And unfortunately, that's for believers too, who at a later point they fully give themselves to Christ and are following Him and choosing His ways of doing things, but are still living with the consequences of their. Yeah, I was going to say some of us in this room can attest to something,
They never discount the Holy Spirit.
Oh, for sure. Praying that for my brother all the time. So it's been a good discussion, but I don't remember where we were here.
Kind of the verse 5-6 area.
Yeah. Divinely powerful weapons. Well, yeah. Why is it important?
Why is it so important? So vital.
Oh,
It's we learn how to fight against it.
Yes. Which if you fight with effective weapons in a battle, the result is you win.
Yes.
Victory.
Without getting into reading from the back, then how you fight. There's we get those answers.
How,
Well, there's
let's stay in this
that's
topic. Yeah.
keep answers in here, otherwise we'll be in the
Yeah. We'll actually talk next week about some specific weapons of our warfare, Adam.
But it's being able to answer against the knowledge, or they're going against the knowledge of God. It's like you're being able to answer.
Could it be that he doesn't want us to be complacent and not be in the fight? Because maybe then that means we don't care about all those items that are coming up. Like I have a friend who will be like, "Oh, do you have a new girlfriend?" to a girl, like, but it'd be harder for her to address something. I mean, why is it so vital? Is it saying if you don't address all these large ideas, then you're just going to be complacent? What do you think this guy wants to answer it? Just for victory, you're saying?
You're saying Paul?
Well, this question here says, why is it vital?
Yes. Why is it vital to practice
So
using
to win,
divine
so you're not lazy.
weapons, not human weapons? Why is that important?
Well, in 5 and 6, that's not what it's saying in 5 and 6, though.
But 5 and 6 are following up that idea,
Okay.
right? Destroying arguments and all arrogance, raising against the knowledge of God, taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. This is this divine weapons. No, divine power, right? This is the divine power by taking every false thought captive with divinely inspired truth, right?
Oh, like in your own thoughts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry. Now I'm tracking with where you're going. You were talking about like having conversations with other people.
Yeah.
How do
to
you
me, battles are always with somebody else.
Sure.
It's a good point.
How to
It's
get
not always yourself.
involved in political action or something like that, or you
Any
know.
spiritual concept. Really.
Sure. Yes.
We will.
Yeah, and this is talking about Paul in regards to the Corinthians, right? But it's still applicable for us too, because it's correcting our disobedience with obedience.
Once our obedience is corrected,
Yes.
we're shown the right way to do it, then we can show them through our obedience.
Yes. Although I don't know if I would go into us punishing others for their disobedience, because this is a specific role that Paul had as an apostle with the church, right?
You're not able to argue and fight. You don't know to know the answers, then you can join in the fight against them.
Yeah, 100%. And that can be speaking truth to other people in their lives, right? But yeah, sorry, I was not tracking with you, Leslie. What we're talking about is our own spiritual battles, right? The fortresses that have been raised up against us, right? That have been that we're raising up in some ways in our own lives. The disobedient
To me, it's
thoughts.
just all about arguing with people. You know what I mean? I just didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and there is an element of that.
Like you give them this verse and then you give them that verse. And it just sounded like
yes.
Do you hear what he's saying?
well, and I mean, I kind of was thinking there's a spiritual undertone to every thing. Like we were talking about animal, like fur babies and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets, and where it get, I mean, the spiritual undertone of that is that human life is no longer valuable. You know, which goes against God.
It devalues it.
Yeah, devalue the.
It's not valuable at all. Like it's not valuable at all. That's not what they're saying. It just places it on a lower level.
Right, and then, but you know, we know that in Genesis, you know, God says, "Have dominion over every living thing." So God places us above the animals and plants of the world. 100%. You know, we're not on equal footing. I mean, that's kind of something that is talked about.
Yeah.
Like even like reincarnation, you come back as a plant if you're not very good personally.
Yeah,
But you know what I mean though? Like, is it talking about like a spiritual undertone or something to everything?
well, there is a spiritual undertone to everything. Sorry, I don't know that I'm processing totally as well as I normally do. So I'm probably not because I feel like I'm missing you guys a little bit.
Well, I guess I mean you're kind of saying the way this application mostly is within our own minds. This is a battle that's going on in our minds.
It's a larger principle that definitely affects our own minds, no question. Right?
But it can also.
It also can be in that conversation you had with your friends, right? It can be there. It's laying out the principle that the way that we address these battles that we have in our life, and those are internal battles, and those are internal battles that other people are having. But he's not really talking about battles between us and someone else, like pitting ourselves against someone
Like
else and going,
overall obedience.
they're the
Like
enemy.
just overall obedience and disobedience to Christ. Not like necessarily it's like the obedience, not like how like or trying to win something. It's like you're trying to win having obedience to Christ.
Exactly. Yes. And choosing not to address our deepest issues that we have and that others have, right? It's that too, with human weapons, which is what we're prone to, right? That's where we started. We're prone to, and that's why even like the mundane things that you were talking about earlier, I don't know how, but I wouldn't lean on human weapons for those things either, right?
Yeah.
Like the way to fight our battles as believers is with the divinely powerful weapons of war, right? Not with human weapons. That's his point, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of the destroying of arguments and these are arguments that exist in our own minds, right? We're being argued all the time for different points of view and different ideas, and a lot of those ideas are false and not based on true things, right? So battling them, yeah, sure, battling them in a way. I wouldn't say like we're pitting ourselves against an enemy here, right? But battling them in a way of like battling bad ideas, which could be in our own mind or helping a friend out or something
More
like that.
often, I mean, we don't really argue with people about intense concepts that often, but in our own minds and in our own home, it's a lot more common.
Yeah.
So
and we
I mean,
can
it just
definitely
makes sense that
be
you would bring
misled,
it in.
right?
Yeah.
We can definitely kind of fall into battling like everybody else in the world battles the struggles in our lives, right? And his encouragement, what he's calling them to, is divine weapons.
If anything, too, it's almost like you don't even have arguments, but that's not being obedient to God, right? Like it's almost like you don't want to have.
Yeah. That's why once I was like, okay, I see where you're going with that. Because it uses the word argument, like we're supposed to be arguing with one another, right?
You're like destroying arguments. Like it's like you don't want to have those arguments or those thoughts to argue.
Yeah, arguments as like ideas.
Yeah.
Right. Good ideas, bad ideas. We want to battle bad ideas with good ideas, right? That's the kind of argumentation it's talking about. Not mixing it up with somebody else.
Sometimes it's hard not to be literal. I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
it
no.
kind of throws you.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I should have caught that. I would usually catch something like that, but not working on this.
So, truth.
100%. But I guess I want to keep our focus away from this idea that this is an external reality that he's trying to deal with.
He's not trying to say go argue with everybody.
No,
Yeah.
because if we do that, here's my like pastoral heart coming up here. I'm like, if we focus on all the other bad ideas that other people have, we're not going to fight the battles we need to fight in our own minds about things, right? And that's what's being addressed here. Like it's at least part of what's being addressed here, right? Is that we are going to have bad ideas that are whispered in our ears, right?
When you're encouraging us to search our hearts and see if there be any wicked way, it's almost like we also need to search for those fortresses and strongholds that we might not see.
Sure. Yeah, because
we don't see them because that's why they're so high and tall.
Yeah. Well, and even the idea of a fortress, right? Which we don't have even castles here in America or whatever. But this is a fixed building that's not going to go down easy, right? And that's why it's usually translated as stronghold. It's a strong place that is difficult to battle once you get there. But we got divine weapons that can knock that fortress down.
They build up. Sometimes tell that truth breaks through that stronghold. Even if you saw it. That's really it's enough. You layer it up so you have to peel back the layer. Peel back another layer until you get to the center.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good illustration of something that we all probably could relate to, is that that sort of defense mechanism, like someone hurts me, and so I'm going to become hard against that person, right? I'm going to respond with a wall because I don't want to be hurt second time. Like we can all relate to that, but that's very human. That's a human way to respond to that, right? It's just one example of ways that we buy the kind of the normal way our world does things, right? The normal way our flesh and our humanness wants to respond to things, and I'm not saying that for us to shame ourselves for having walls, like we all do it, right? But let's seek His divine solutions for those moments, not our own tendencies.
Sometimes you say that a verse wouldn't be applicable to us. Could you help me understand verse 6? Is that applicable to us?
Yes, but to get to an application, you have to get to his original intent, which this is Paul the apostle speaking about the fact that he is actually there are these people who have come into the Corinthian church and are spreading bad information, and they're tearing Paul down and telling the Corinthian church, you shouldn't listen to him. He's got the wrong ideas. We've got the right ideas. You need to listen to us. And he is addressing that in his role as one of their spiritual leaders of that church. And so there's actual disobedience going on in the Corinthian church, like real identifiable. He identifies it in other parts of 2 Corinthians. And he is saying, yes, we're going to address that disobedience. When I come, that's going to be dealt with. He's been very clear about that in other parts. And he's telling them, and he's said this just in the passage before this. He says, I'm not going to spare you either. Like if you guys are being disobedient, like these outsiders came in, but if you're being disobedient too, like I'm actually, I'm not, I don't tend to be harsh, but I'm gonna be harsh with you too, if that's what it takes to bring you back to obedience. So that's the context, right? And that's what he's actually trying to communicate. But I think within like a way it can be relatable to us, right? Is that as he's talking about how he is going to address these issues, right? It's going to be spiritual weapons, not human weapons. That the goal is to gain complete obedience in different areas of these guys' life. But if we're applying it to us, different areas of obedience. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah.
And I know it takes a little bit to get there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, because if you think about it, the more these ideas in our own minds, these human ways of doing things are captured, right, and replaced with God's way of doing things, obedience is going to be.
Yes. In context, it's that. It's never going to be, we're going to start punishing people. Or,
No.
what it
That's
says.
why we sort of were going that
It's
direction for a second.
It's
No, this is not about punishing others. Don't go out and go, it's time to go punish all the disobedience I see in my friend's life. No.
That's not possible.
I was just kidding, but it's so far out.
I had something that I thought about during this because I've been kind of doing a study on the Roman Empire and the emperors. I just find it interesting how, and this is I forget the name that verse. It's you used it on Easter a couple years ago.
Do you remember it?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it's a verse about how Christ had victory over the the crucifiers. He anyway, you know how basically he was like executed with a Roman corporal punishment or a capital punishment.
Yes.
And then 300 years later, Constantine makes Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire, right? And like Christianity was the main thing of the Roman Empire. If you count, Byzantine and the Holy Roman Empire up until like 1800s.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if God, like,
if that was prophetic in some ways.
Yeah, like he was kind of, but like you have this physical, powerful force that gets brought down by spiritual warfare. And
yeah, because they thought they had won that day, right, with Jesus. Is that what you're saying? Like
yeah.
It seems like he lost that day, but actually it was the mechanism for victory.
Yeah.
I can't think of exactly what.
I know. I can't.
Yeah. I would say whether it's prophetic or not, it's a great example of Christ's victory over peoples, right? That the only reason why Constantine did that is that Jesus got a hold of his life. Now there's people who doubt that. I just don't know how you can doubt that based on the information we have about his statements about who Jesus is. He was a follower of Jesus. He definitely was. Some people say it was politically expedient and all that kind of stuff. I just think that's some legit. I think he was a follower of Christ, right? So his divine weapon that transformed Constantine and ended up transforming a whole people group for a long period, a long trajectory.
Yeah.
I think it's at least related, if not directly better. Yeah. I don't know if it's helpful.
No, yeah.
Gospel.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Which has always been the story, unfortunately. But 100%, it went to so many different places. It went everywhere basically, with very little hindrance to its spread, where it had been extremely difficult to spread for the first 3 years. Which is definitely God's providence, and we can speak about all this. Something that we do. All right, are we good to move on from the passage? Let's take a break. Well, we have the reading to talk about. So, did anybody get through the whole 8 pages?
I got more than been sitting here.
Okay.
Halfway.
Leslie wins the gold star.
Hi, I thought a bunch of people raised their hand.
No, it's just you.
Oh, it was tough.
Yeah, no.
Oh, you did it? Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I got to page 3.
Page 3.
I had to ignore a lot of people.
Page 4.
To get that much reading done, couldn't do a lot.
I'm trying to
Oh, yeah.
That's hard to do.
I think so.
Pretty close. There's actually hardly anything on page 8. So,
It was actually kind of an easier read.
yeah,
It was kind of easy to fly through it.
even though it was a little longer. It was,
I wanted to make notes of all the details he was sharing, but it didn't. If I lost track, I could easily catch back. It wasn't the hardest. It was good.
yeah, I think the way Curtis Mitchell writes is just easier to read. Where Joel really
Okay.
packs in so much, that it's a little.
That's
The
probably-
whole issue with it. When I'm going on beds, they don't categorize it.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'll go in the same direction.
yes. I got to admit that's my one.
Yeah, I was wondering
Not
about that
crazy
too.
about that part of it. I mean, I think he's just trying to be practical and try to help us see that there's different ways that we can be vulnerable. I just when he made his biblical case for why he believes those 3 categories, I was like, I think you're stretching it a little bit there. But
We know it's all.
well, actually, those 3 categories do exist in Scripture for sure. That our flesh actually more often than Satan being the root of temptation, our flesh is more often listed as the source of temptation. But it's related, and my thing is, I don't know that I would say, I don't know that we respond, like you were saying, somehow differently when we're being tempted by the devil, which we wouldn't really know anyway, would we? Or being tempted by our flesh, or being influenced by what the world, those are so interrelated.
I think you could summarize his thing by saying, when I'm tempted with physical, I realize I just need to stay the heck away from that. And when I'm tempted with self-pleasure, I don't realize this. And I think you could summarize it in your brain and make a few strategies, like he was saying.
Yeah.
But
Obviously,
in the moment, I don't know.
Right,
But overall, with planning your life, I think you could use it. He says that there's 80% unbelievers. What do you think of that?
I think it's hard to come up with that number.
That's what I was wondering.
But I
if
gotta
you
be-
knew the source, or
I
if
gotta
you
be
heard
honest.
other numbers.
If you're asking my guess, I just think it's probably higher.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking the narrow way was way more narrow than that.
Is it 80% inside our church walls?
That's
Well,
pretty close.
I mean, to be serious, I wouldn't put it at 80%, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I'll make this broader than us, but I wouldn't be surprised if most churches have a decent, section there, 10, 20. And we don't get to judge hearts. That's not our place. That's all God. Right? But at least for me, having been in church leadership for a while, it does make me process decisions a little bit differently. To know that I just think we might do things a little differently if we were absolutely certain that 100% of everyone who shows up on a Sunday morning believer. Maybe a little. I'm not saying that we play to that crowd or something. That's a terrible way to say that.
What they ask you. Think of the church. People do come into church when you're saved. It seems to me that church,
Frank is an example of that. Frank Plymouth, he was saved coming to church.
that happens. It's also not church. What is it? Thought about this. It seems to me the church was started. Necessarily for worship.
Church did it that way. Yeah.
Basically.
I completely agree. I think some of you guys have heard my thoughts on that. I don't see anything in scripture that indicates the church is a place for unbelievers. That doesn't mean that you check their ID card at the door, right? Because there's really one instance in which there's a picture of talking about prophetic words happening, and that an unbeliever comes in and witnesses it, right? But that seems to be the exception.
Well, that's when God draws that person in and sets it up.
Sure.
Or no.
Yeah. But it was a very different time too. I mean, you really, if you're going to go join those Christ followers, like that was going to cost you something. Even if you were just kind of checking it out, that was going to cost you something. Where today it's almost the opposite. It's like you actually get maybe some benefits from saying like I'm a church going person, or I'm a single guy and I hear there's a lot of great girls at church, and like there are these like other benefits that 100%, yeah. Oh,
I do it for the social.
leaning on other
Food, people
no,
go for the
no
food.
joke.
That's why I'm
People
Potluck.
going because they know they're going to be around people that might care for them. That if their car breaks down, they might have someone who will come help them fix it. Like there are other fringe benefits of being part of the church today that I think drive some of that.
But we're obedient. We just love them.
Yeah, and we don't know, right? We don't know, and unless it becomes clear, and then deal with that how we deal with that. But yeah, love them, care for them, speak the truth, encourage them like a brother or sister because they're claiming to be a brother or sister. Yeah. Back to the.
We know you're thinking because you have
Just send her to me. I'll set her straight up.
Let me send her to your wife. Let the ladies take care of it.
You know what? Okay. So now we're talking about, but I'll just say, like, there has been a movement in the past 150 years to see maybe a goodness in casting a wider net for people to show up on a Sunday morning to the church building, and there are definitely plenty of people in those like seeker sensitive movements where the gospel presentations are kind of the regular. See, my problem with that is like we should be about discipling, right? Teaching line by line, truth by truth, building that into the lives of people. Like
And they
that's
move that into their small groups.
that's exactly, yeah. They just have kind of changed the model and said, you know, like I've been to Willow Creek Church. I was there in when I was in college. We went up there.
299.
Which is no,
Willow
sorry.
Creek is a big
Willow
church.
Creek was like the first mega church.
Oh.
Outside of Chicago. I forget what the name is, but they had like 25,000 people on a weekend, right? They were all about this. They kind of started, or were the ones to kind of get the seeker sensitive movement out there. This would be. They were all about like church really happens in these small groups that you have midweek. This is an evangelistic meeting basically, on Sunday.
Almost like a Billy Graham.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean,
A little bit that, and I can't like fault their motives. I also can't fault the fact that many people have come to faith through those ministries, right? I think for me, we tend to misunderstand the church if that becomes the model of the church. A little easier when we call it an evangelistic crusade, like Billy Graham, right?
It kind of falls in, that works because it's a larger population to draw that, where this is a smaller population area, and so the format has to be different for the needs.
Sure. But I've known some seeker sensitive churches in smaller areas too, and
you have to be more intentional to join a group and push yourself instead of just showing up on Sundays. You have to really push.
and I think it's far more easy for the people who would just come on a regular basis on a Sunday morning to not know that that's church, right?
Yeah.
And to know that
Checking the box.
that they actually, there's more that they need to be doing to actually be a part of the church and be what the church is supposed to be. Yeah. Anyway, got me going.
Thanks, guys.
But it all
I'll
comes
be
down
sure-
when
I'll be
the
picking up with your wife on
individual
Sunday.
gets
Yeah,
lost
let
in
me
the
talk
crowd
home.
and not
I'm sending it to
involved,
you guys.
then that's where it breaks down.
I agree, and I have heard people tell me, more than a few people tell me, who go to little larger churches. They're like, I really like that I'm kind of and it just is killing me in my heart. I'm like, that is not the church. The church is not a place you show up to be anonymous. That's not the church.
And at least they're there.
Yeah, it's like I'm thankful
Might
that
take a different path later in the church.
yes, which would be great. But I just think you're missing out, right? You're missing out on what the church actually is supposed to be for you, you know.
Once they do that, then it's like, oh, what the heck was I doing?
Yeah, what have been missing this? Oh,
Screensaver.
yes. What's like what?
Are we supposed to talk about stuff that we highlighted?
Yes, we are supposed to be talking about that, this has nothing to do with the church. So.
I highlighted something and
H2.
I don't know if this might. It's who is ultimately controlling every unsaved man? Satan.
Yeah, I highlighted that too.
And then according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air. Or that's what every unsaved man is walking.
Yeah.
And that kind of made
The sons of disobedience, which is really anybody who's not following Jesus, they're unwittingly under the power of Satan.
it kind of made me it made me think of the Matrix, about how when he's in the program, like anyone could be an agent, could become an agent, like every passerby. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. I've never really thought about like, wow, like the devil could be working through this unbeliever and work.
Wow, that is a great parallel. I love that.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, because that is the fear in the Matrix, right? Are you just familiar with the Matrix?
No, it is.
Is that you don't know who is an agent, right? Or who could at any moment become an agent. Right?
Yeah.
And that's really the truth. Now, I don't know that we should go around being paranoid constantly and be like,
Asking people on angel by Satan.
yeah, yeah. But
But all the
but I think that does build a caution a little bit over people's viewpoints and ideas, you know, because our enemy could be using them to convince us of things that are damaging or hurtful.
But then on like the bottom of page 2, I just kind of skimmed through this, but then it's saying that we have an enemy right on the side of our body, a traitor within the ranks of our own personality, through which Satan can operate. So it's like not even right inside of us without us even if we're not acknowledging that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like on page 1 that it kind of starts there too, like when you're fighting the battle, you know, what is it going to throw out of this word we must learn? So I kind of like the yeah, we'll be aware of what's going on, but I think sometimes we're not aware that we need to be going around like aware of what's going on inside of us too.
Yeah.
That's what I'm excited to go and read this. Just a few things standing out, kind of like makes us pause and go, hey, wait a second. Because I know I'm very aware of things going outside of me,
Right, outside influences.
but not so much like focusing on what's inside me, maybe like if he's working inside of me on things like my insecurities or my fears.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I was interested in the middle of page 2 where it says the subtle kind of temptation is from the world. And like, you might be able to do something at a reasonable level, maybe, and maybe it's when you do it too much, then that's too worldly. I don't know, but like, say you were obsessed with the news or something, and say you watch the news 30 minutes a day, and then you start doing 2 hours of news a day. Or, you know, like, do you think that's where you kind of have to say that's a little bit worldly? Or
No,
it's not illegal or nasty, but it's devastating.
I've not always personally subscribed to the idea that that worldly, as far as the Bible speaks about it, is participating in things that the world participates in.
Mhm.
You know, in my younger years, I grew up in some church circles in which it was like, you can't go bowling because that's where all the people who are drinking and smoking go to go bowling. You know what I'm saying? Like bowling is bad now because that's
No,
a
but
worldly
that's too
activity.
much of something, maybe.
Right?
Is that
Maybe,
what
yeah,
you're saying?
because that's an allegiance thing. I actually think he's talking about the fact that the influence of the world is very subtle in the way that I like how this writer, his name is John Stone Street. He speaks about the fact that culture is like being a fish in water, right? Fish don't know they're wet. They just swim around and this is normal, right? And until they're plucked out of the water, they realize that there was actually something around them, right? Culture kind of works that way, that we don't necessarily even realize how much we're influenced by culture because we're in the culture, right? We just swim in this culture all the time. And so I think that's the way it's subtle. I think that's what he's kind of getting, is that's just these subtle ways that our world just smuggles in assumptions for us that we
Like you
roll
mow
with
your
it.
lawn every week, so you can't go to church. Or
Sure.
is that what you? I mean,
Sure. I mean, it could be that. I mean, he was using that as an example.
he said
right?
their new house, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think, man, that's crazy. Like, because they've got to keep up the appearance of their house, because of course everybody keeps up the appearance of their house.
Mm.
They're missing out on the fellowship of the church. Like, that is just a subtle way that we can be influenced, right? Yeah.
Anything that takes away the time that we put aside for the Lord.
Sure. Yeah, I guess, for me, I see it a lot with students because they're learning how to be discerning, but they're not all quite there yet. And so they'll just say things like, I mean, we just have these discussions like they say, how can you love someone else how can you love someone else if you can't love yourself?
Oh,
I'm like, well, let's think about this, guys. Like,
But you can read that in every magazine.
where do you see that biblically,
Yeah,
right? But they translate that into their Christian life, and it's like, and I always come back with like, Was Jesus loving himself when he died upon the cross? Like, that wasn't self-love, right? It's just these subtle lies that we can kind of get caught up with, you know? When I'm upset, the world is full of rationalization.
On the
most
physical.
horrible things. It's horrible things.
So I only got to page 3, and then he mentions like sometimes you're supposed to run away from temptation, but I guess maybe we can get to the part. How are you supposed to know what to do with each particular type?
And that's where I'm just not with
You should.
Curtis Mitchell here.
That's where it kind of gets in the weeds.
I don't know. Like, it sounds like he figured out like ways to categorize his own temptations in his life. I just don't. I don't know that would be helpful for me. I'll just say that.
Like a temptation, we don't really have to categorize it. I mean, maybe it can be helpful for people, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what category it's in. If it's
Yeah, and if it helps you to categorize, I guess maybe you can get on board with his thoughts. I don't know. So I just think, honestly, we should flee from all temptation, not just some. I mean, he uses Joseph. It's another one of my things. It's like that's not what the story of Joseph was talking about. That's not the whole Potiphar's wife thing. It's not about fleeing from temptation. It's about how unjustly Joseph's treated. But anyway, those are my own pet peeves. But we should not be running towards temptation. Like he was using the example of the students that would be like, yeah, I'm gonna go with my girlfriend to a romantic spot, and if we start getting tempted, we've already committed to praying with one another. Like, no, that's dumb.
They're already halfway to the sand, and by the time they're on their knees,
right,
don't do it.
So and his illustration, like literally, I've done that with students so many times. It's like, go with other friends, go to public places, never be alone with one another. Like, these are wise ways to avoid temptation, right?
So what I caught was sometimes it says you can stand up and fight for it, but other times you can't. It's better off just to run away. Yeah. It's like you choose your battle. Do you want to stand up and fight against this temptation, or just totally avoid it? That same situation.
For me, I'm a little uncomfortable with that idea because for one, it sounds like, and granted, he's very clear on the fact that the Holy Spirit has to be the one at work in battling temptation. He mentions it a few times, right? But that almost makes it sound like somehow I can stand against temptation. That is, we cannot stand against temptation. We are too weak in our flesh. So I don't even like the idea of like, I'm going to fight. Hey, I'm going to stand up against this one. Watching this type of movie is, usually tempts me, and I usually go off and fantasizing about lust. But this time I'm going to beat it.
it's not because you're saying you are going to beat it. It's not like problem like we're not going to beat it.
Yeah.
It's the Holy Spirit that wants to work through us. Like, we're not going to be able to do it by putting ourselves in that bad situation.
Yes.
What about the fact that he says you only need to do a devotion if you are tempted by A or B? I mean, I was curious about that because I was like, well, if I don't struggle with the world, then I can take a few days off. I mean, that's kind of maybe not a great point to make.
Well, I don't love it. Again, I don't love the categorization. I like what he says in this writing for the most part, right? But I don't like the categorization. I am really tired. Categorization, because what he's saying is the world's influence is this subtle, persistent influence, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need a persistent way to battle that by daily being in the Word.
And I did like how you said that if there's a hole there, then something's going to fill it. And I did like that.
Yeah. I kind of get the logic of that or whatever, but
Say that again. You battle it by being in the Word.
By being consistently in the Word. That's what he's talking about devotions, like daily being in the Word. Because you're daily inundated with the subtle lies of the world. You need to be daily inundated with the truths of Scripture to battle it. I think there's wisdom in that. I'm not criticizing him about that. It's the over categorization that I'm like,
I've definitely, like if you like start watching some YouTube video, I mean, I'll do that sometimes. And but then you listen to some like a spiritual person, or like something about the Bible, Christian person talk. It really makes a huge difference for me personally. Like than listening to just some political talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do notice that.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like brings life and peace to my soul.
I used to listen in my early 20s when I was working in the funeral business. I was doing lots of driving. I used to listen to talk radio a lot, like Rush Limbaugh,
Paul Harvey.
well,
Did you
Paul
listen to
Harvey's
Rush
great.
when
Listen,
Flint got inaugurated?
I'm
he
sure
would
I
say
did.
like, "This is day 100 of America being held hostage." He would say it every day.
Awesome. and I found that it was making me angrier. I would not respond in love if someone had an idea that I disagreed with. Like I was becoming a rush, and so I shut that off and I started listening to the stuff that was going to edify me, right? Like at that time, I started listening to the Calvary Radio Network. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
CSN.
Just has a bunch of guys
Yeah.
preaching, right?
Alistair Bag.
And I was like, I think he was on there, yeah.
Yeah, to every man.
Yes, yeah, the Bible answer. And I was like, it really was changing kind of my attitudes and all that stuff. So I think there's something.
Yeah.
No question. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I'm a little less harsh on it than,
It sounded really hard. Okay.
but I did find it helpful to identify some of the sins that we really don't think of as sins. Like, for instance, I'm not beautiful anymore. I'm too fat. I'm too stupid to speak up in a meeting. Things that we say to ourselves that are contrary to what God's word says about ourselves. And the answer to that is knowing scripture that affirms who we are. And I think he did point that out, that when we're tempted in our relationship to God, Satan is the accuser of the believer. So anytime a person is accusing themselves, really it's Satan that is doing the accusing. And we don't need to listen to him. But if we don't know the scripture, we don't have a way to fight it, which is a different thing than if you're tempted to have sex with a girlfriend after your date.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a different thing.
It really is. Yeah.
It's a different thing.
It is.
And fleeing is a good idea in those cases. So anyway, I did find some of those suggestions interesting, and I think I will remember this reading for a while, because our relationship with God is really very important, and we should think of ourselves as the way He thinks of us,
Because that's the truth about it.
because that's the truth. And so I did appreciate it.
Comes back to the the end of verse 6, that obedience. Once we learn how to be obedient by keeping daily in the Lord, then we. But anyways, yeah. But I was trying to pull the verse back up. But once we learn how to be obedient, then we can fight that better and control that more and be able to follow that better.
As long as we're using those spiritual weapons.
Yes, we have to be able to identify what that is and start to battle it in ourselves.
Jesus said he came to bring truth. And that must be a pretty important thing then. Truth is not relative, and it's not my truth or your truth. It is the truth.
We don't get to define that.
No, no, we don't. We don't.
I want to, but
We do. We do.
But what would you say is like the main
It's in
best
the last paragraph,
main takeaway?
just the very last. It gives the whole summary.
He does sum it up.
Yeah.
When tempted by the devil and their God consciousness, resist with the word. Tempted by the world and ego, check out your devotional love for him. That's where the real problem lies. When tempted by the flesh and biological drives of the body, run, baby, run. Needless to say, all of these tactical maneuvers must be carried out by utilizing the power.
Really interesting. He said, like, I forgot what I was going to say. He said, if you're tempted by the world, see it as a warning and go read your Bible. Very interesting. And he said it'll go away all the way. It'll disappear.
That's the TLDR.
A lot of confidence.
Too long.
He doesn't
It's not reading.
doesn't say what are your needs. Because the Holy Spirit fixes it. It took me years to learn.
I agree, because what you're describing is seeking divine, right? It all is coming full circle, right? That is the answer. That's the answer. Instead of going, I got this, which is the worst thing we can say,
yeah, because we don't.
because we don't got it.
What happens when
Why is there no knee pads in the armor? It's not really mentioned, right?
It actually is mentioned at the end.
Oh,
We'll talk about that next week. Thanks for that segue to it's not a piece of the armor, but yeah, it's right after that. Yeah, we're gonna look at Ephesians 6 next time. Do you want to take this home for posterity? Say that you were here. It's funny that you say that, because I've reformatted these, and the originals of these are smaller. 11 point